My name is Margaret Callie, and I'm 29 years old. If you asked anyone to describe me, they'd probably use the same words Dean once did: steady, predictable, safe. Funny how those words used to sound like compliments until the night he turned them into weapons. I wasn't the girl who lit up the room the moment she walked in. I never pretended to be. I was the one you could count on, the one who remembered deadlines, who showed up on time, who kept promises even when it wasn't convenient. That part of me came from my father. He worked 2 jobs my entire childhood, but still made it home for dinner every night. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable. To me, that was love consistency, not chaos. When I met Dean, everything about him felt like the opposite of me. He was impulsive, quick to laugh, and always surrounded by people. If I wanted quiet nights with a book, he wanted rooftop bars and loud music. Where I saved, he spent. Where I planned, he improvised. I'll admit I was drawn to it in the beginning. Dean made me feel like maybe I was too careful, too cautious, and he pulled me into a world of spontaneity I never would have stepped into on my own. For 4 years, I thought we balanced each other out. I paid most of our rent so he could finish his master's degree. I cut corners in my budget, skipped the new car I wanted, passed on nights out with coworkers because I believed I was investing in us. I didn't complain. I wanted him to finish school without debt, to chase his dreams without the weight I knew money could bring. I thought we were building a future together piece by piece. Dean talked about marriage in the way some people talk about vacations, vague, dreamy something someday. Still, he'd drop hints, the kind of wedding he'd want, jokes about rings he'd seen in storefronts. I took those as signs enough to believe that when the time was right, he'd be ready too. So when Dean graduated and landed his first real job, I thought, this is it. We've made it through the hard part. We can finally move forward. I spent 3 months saving for a ring. Not the biggest diamond, but elegant, something classic that I knew he'd appreciate. I planned the proposal down to the detail of the park where we'd had our first real date, the little lake where the city lights reflected in the water. Cheesy maybe, but meaningful. That night my hands were trembling so badly on the steering wheel that I almost couldn't drive. The ring box in my pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. I had practiced what to say over and over, but none of it sounded perfect. In the end, I told myself sincerity mattered more than poetry. I wanted him to know that I wasn't just offering a ring. I was offering a life I'd been quietly building for both of us. Dean was already sitting on a bench when I arrived, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, smiled that disarming smile that had once hooked me completely, and for a moment I let myself believe this would be a story we'd tell our kids someday. I led him to the lake, tried to make conversation about his new job, about how proud I was. He nodded distractedly, half listening, half watching the ducks on the water. My throat went dry, but I pushed forward. Dean, I said, stopping at the spot I'd chosen. We've been through so much together. You make me laugh, you push me to see the world differently, and you make me want to build something real. I can't imagine my life without you. I pulled the ring from my pocket, sank to one knee, and opened the box. His reaction was immediate. He laughed. Not nervous laughter, not shock laughter. A loud, dismissive, almost mocking laugh. The kind of laugh people give when they've just heard a bad joke. You're serious, he said, smirking. My heart lurched. Of course I'm serious. Dean shook his head, still laughing. Margaret, you honestly think I'd marry this? You're safe, predictable. The girl guys date when they want stability, but marriage, I want passion. I want risk. I want life, not this. He waved at the ring like it was a toy from a vending machine. The words hit harder than any scream could have. For a moment, I thought he'd backpedal, that maybe he'd laugh it off as a bad joke, but he didn't. His eyes were smug, certain. I closed the box, slowly slipped it into my pocket, and stood. My voice was calm, calmer than I felt. Thank you, I said. Dean blinked. For what? For being clear. I turned and walked away, his mocking laugh still echoing in the night air. I don't remember the drive home that night, just the sound of his laughter still ricocheting inside my skull. The ring box sat on the passenger seat like a brick, heavier with every red light I stopped at. By the time I walked into my apartment, I set it on the counter and just stared at it, like maybe the universe would blink and give me a different ending. It didn't. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there in the dark, my chest hollow, trying to replay 4 years of love and wondering how it could collapse in the span of 30 seconds. Safe, predictable, boring. His words weren't just a rejection of marriage. They felt like a rejection of who I was, of everything I'd given. The next morning, my phone lit up with his name a text. I didn't mean it like that. Can we talk? I stared at it until the screen went black. No apology, no recognition of the cruelty in his laughter, just a flimsy backpedal as if I'd imagined it. 2 days later, another message. I think I overreacted. I was surprised, that's all. Maybe we should start over. Start over, like he hadn't crushed me under his smug certainty, like I hadn't watched his eyes gleam with mockery as I knelt before him. I didn't reply. A week passed. Then came a longer message. Look, you know I care about you. I'm just not ready for marriage yet. But I don't want to lose you. Don't throw away what we have. That one nearly got me. Nearly because buried under all the arrogance, there was a piece of the Dean I had once loved. The Dean who made me laugh on rainy mornings, who kissed me in grocery store aisles, who once whispered that I was his home. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the urge to fix, to forgive, pulsing through me like an old habit. But then just as quickly the memory of his face returned. Not soft, not uncertain, but smug. Certain. The kind of certainty that cuts deeper than any blade. I put the phone down and turned it off. Silence became my answer. At first it was unbearable. I didn't know what to do with the quiet. Night stretched on endlessly, my apartment echoing with absence. But then something unexpected happened. The silence started to feel like space. A space I could fill with something other than him. I joined a gym at first just to exhaust myself enough to sleep. The soreness in my muscles became proof that I could still feel something real. Something that was mine. I started cooking meals instead of grabbing takeout, savoring the control of choosing what nourished me. Little by little, the heaviness inside me shifted. I wasn't healed, not even close. But each day I went without responding, each rep at the gym. Each quiet dinner alone was a brick, laid on a new foundation, one that wasn't built around him. And yet in the quietest corners of my mind, his voice still lingered. You'll never do better than me. I didn't know it yet, but that line, that venom disguised as truth, would become the very fire that pushed me forward. Months blurred into each other, each one quieter than the last. My life slowly began to take on a rhythm that didn't include Dean. Work consumed me in a good way. I volunteered for projects I would have once avoided, and people started to notice. I earned a raise, not huge, but enough to prove that stability wasn't weakness, it was strength. At the gym, I was no longer just burning energy. I was pushing myself harder, measuring progress in sore muscles and heavier lifts. The mirror once, something I avoided, began to show a version of me I almost didn't recognize. Stronger, sharper, more alive. Friends noticed it too. At first they tiptoed around his name as though saying, Dean out loud might shatter me all over again. Eventually they stopped avoiding it. That was how I first heard about his new girlfriend. Have you seen her? My coworker Kara whispered at lunch, sliding her phone across the table. I didn't want to look, but curiosity is cruel. There he was, grinning in photo after photo, his arm around a woman with long dark hair and a smile that demanded attention. She was everything I wasn't. Bold, glamorous, the kind of woman who thrived in the spotlight, rooftop selfies, champagne glasses clinking hashtags about living life to the fullest. Kara raised her eyebrows. She's something, huh? I smiled, or at least pretended to. She is. That night, lying in bed, I replayed those images in my mind. Dean's arm wrapped around her waist the same way it once held mine. His grin was it wider now, happier, had he ever looked at me that way. The bitterness curled tight in my chest. I hated myself for caring, for comparing. I told myself I'd moved on, that I was stronger now. But the truth was, I wasn't as immune as I wanted to believe. Still, I didn't stalk, didn't scroll endlessly. I muted his profile, deleted his number from my phone for the 10th time. I wanted the distance, needed it. Yet gossip has a way of sneaking in whether you invite it or not. At a dinner party, a mutual friend leaned closer, lowering his voice as if spilling a secret. So Dean's new thing, let's just say it's not as perfect as Instagram makes it look. My fork hovered midair. I forced a casual tone. Oh, he smirked. She's wild. Drama all the time. They fight in public. Honestly, it's exhausting just hearing about it. I nodded, pretending not to care. but inside I felt a flicker not of hope, but of grim recognition. Dean had wanted passion chaos, the kind of fire that burned too hot to hold, and he'd found it. For a long time I thought that flicker was satisfaction, even justice. But later I would realize it was something else entirely, foreshadowing. Because fires that burn that brightly, they don't last. The first message came late at night, months after the last time I'd seen his name on my screen. I miss you. 2 words, simple, dangerous. I stared at them, my thumb hovering, heart pounding faster than I wanted to admit. It would have been so easy to type back, I miss you too, and pretend none of it had happened. But then I remembered his laugh at the lake, sharp and mocking, and my chest tightened. I set the phone down. I didn't reply. A week later, another message. We were good together. Don't pretend you don't remember. The nerve, the arrogance, and yet I read it twice, maybe 3 times before deleting it. By the 3rd week, his tone shifted. You'll never find anyone who cares like I do. That one made me laugh bitterly. Care was mocking my proposal, his version of caring, or dismissing me as safe and boring. I ignored him again, but the messages kept coming, swinging like a pendulum. Apologies laced with nostalgia. Then insults dipped in desperation. I was stupid, Margaret. You were the best thing I had. You're still single, right? Figures. Who else would put up with boring? It was like watching him unravel in real time, the confidence he once wore like armor cracking at the seams. I should have blocked him, but some part of me, the part that had given him 4 years of my life, couldn't quite cut the cord. Instead, I let his words sit unread, gathering dust in my inbox, like dead leaves in a corner. And then fate decided silence wasn't enough. At a friend's birthday dinner, I was laughing with Kara when I felt that familiar prickling sensation of eyes on me. I turned and there he was. Dean, he looked the same yet not. Still handsome, still charming on the surface, but thinner somehow, edges frayed. His new girlfriend was nowhere in sight. He carried his glass of wine like it was a lifeline. Margaret, he said, as if the sound of my name on his lips might erase everything between us. I gave a polite nod. Dean. His smile faltered at my tone. He leaned closer. Can we talk? I shook my head lightly. There's nothing to talk about. Come on, he pressed, lowering his voice. You know that night. I didn't mean to. Laugh in my face. I cut in, my voice sharper than I expected. The table quieted for a beat, heads turning, but I didn't care. His jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Desperation. The same man who once told me I'd never do better was standing in front of me, begging for another chance. I picked up my glass. Steady hand, steady voice. Dean, the only thing I regret is thinking you deserved a version of me who once believed in you. His face fell. For a second I thought he might argue, but then he just swallowed, the arrogance draining from his expression. I turned back to my friends, laughter returning to the table as if nothing had happened. But inside my pulse was racing. Not from longing, not from doubt, but from a strange, intoxicating sense of freedom. For the first time since the lake, I realized I wasn't his anymore. Freedom feels different than I expected. It wasn't a sudden burst of joy or a triumphant scream into the night. It was quieter than that, like finally taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. I didn't meet Elliot in some whirlwind moment. There were no fireworks, no instant rush of adrenaline. We met at a community volunteer event, repainting an old library of all places. He was the guy who stayed late to stack chairs when everyone else left. The one who laughed easily but not loudly. His steadiness wasn't something he flaunted. It was simply who he was. I remember the first time he asked me to grab coffee afterward. My instinct was hesitation, because hadn't I learned what happened when I gave someone too much of myself? But Elliot didn't push. He just smiled and said, maybe another time, as if the answer didn't determine his worth. And that strangely was what made me say yes the following week. With Elliot, everything was easy. There were no games, no dramatics. He asked about my day and actually listened. When I made a joke dry, sarcastic, the kind most people missed. He laughed, not because he was supposed to, but because he genuinely found it funny. He didn't see my careful budgeting as boring. He saw it as discipline. He didn't call my reliability predictable. He called it trustworthy. For the first time, the parts of me Dean had weaponized felt like gifts. Our relationship grew in quiet moments, Late night cooking experiments, weekend hikes, reading side by side in comfortable silence. There were no rooftop selfies, no hashtags screaming, living my best life, just real life, a life that didn't need to be shouted into the world to matter. The night Elliot proposed wasn't grand, and that was what made it perfect. We were sitting on the floor of my apartment, takeout containers scattered between us, laughing over some ridiculous movie. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box, and said, "I don't need the perfect moment. I just need you." Tears stung my eyes before I could even open the box. It wasn't about the ring, though it was beautiful. It was about the way he looked at me, as if I wasn't a placeholder or a safe option, but his choice, his only choice. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, and I collapsed into his arms, laughing and crying all at once. And just like that, the memory of the Lake of Dean's mocking laugh lost its grip on me. It didn't vanish. Scars never do. But it faded, replaced by something stronger. Love, real steady and perfect, and mine. Elliot and I walked into the engagement party hand in hand, laughter and music spilling out of the crowded room. Familiar faces greeted us, glasses of champagne raised in celebration. It felt like stepping into a different life, one I wasn't sure I would ever have. And then I saw him. Dean. He noticed me almost instantly. His eyes flicked to my left hand, where Elliot's ring gleamed under the warm lights. I watched the recognition hit the way his smile froze for just a second before he plastered it back on. He made his way over, drink in hand, his charm turned up like a mask. "Wow, he said, his voice smooth but tight around the edges. "You look different." I nodded politely. "Good to see you, Dean." And this must be his eyes darted to Elliot. "Elliot," I said, sliding my arm around him, "my fiancé." For a split second, Dean's expression cracked bitterness flashing behind his smile. He recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Engaged already? Didn't waste any time, huh?" Elliot simply smiled, his grip on my hand. Steady. "When you know, you know." Dean tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Don't you think it's a little fast, Margaret? I mean, after everything we had, I cut him off before he could dig any deeper." My voice was calm, measured. "There is no we." "Dean hasn't been for a long time." His smile faltered, his jaw tightening. He leaned closer, dropping the pretense. "You really think he's better than me? He's not even." His eyes flicked over Elliot dismissively. "Half the excitement I gave you." I looked him straight in the eye. "Maybe, but unlike you, he doesn't see me as a mistake." For the first time, Dean had no comeback. His mouth opened, then closed again, words choking before they formed. The arrogance, the smug certainty that had once defined him slipped away, leaving nothing but silence. I gave him a small nod, polite, final. "Take care of yourself, Dean." Then I turned back to Elliot, who squeezed my hand without a word. Together we walked away, laughter and music swallowing us back into the party. Behind me I could feel Dean's eyes burning holes into my back, desperate and hollow. But I didn't look back, because I wasn't his safe option anymore. I was just someone he lost, and someone who had finally stopped caring.